everyone, my name is Megan. I redid the inside of my horse trailer. Everything is custom made by me, even the curtains. So I'm going to go ahead and make a tutorial on how you can make this curtain here that just has some clasp. That's easy as unhooking and flopping down. In order to get started, we'll need to know the dimensions of the said window. So you'll want to get a width, which I went to the outer edges of the frame. So we've got 1 4 inches by 2 1 inches. Things you'll need is fabric, 2 pieces of like 1/4 inch wood to the width of the outside of your frame, so 1 4 inches, and then any type of strap you would like to make. You could make it out of fabric or whatever. I just happen to have some cowhide on hand.
So again, what you're going to need is fabric, something for your straps, whether it's leather or other fabric, 4 D-rings, 2 clasps, 2 keychain rings, and your 2 boards, and then of course something for measuring all this out. The next step would be measuring your 2 boards to the width that you measured on your window. Here you can see me measuring those out. Then you're going to cut them out with whatever tools you have on hand, whether it's like me with this X-Acto knife, or if you have a circular saw or whatever is convenient for you. My boards were so thin, they're only 1/4 inch. It's leftover cedar plank from remodeling my trailer, so it's easy to just score and snap, as you can see. Now I'm going to smooth out the edges using my X-Acto knife just to kind of make them prettier and less jagged. My boards are only 1 inch wide, but you can make them however wide you need. Here I'm showing you the cowhide that I use for my straps. I'm going to make them both 1 inch wide by 4.5 inches long. So here you can see they're 2 inches wide. Here's the clasp that I had on hand. And then my D-rings are 3/4 inch wide, but you can use however wide you need. You could do 1 inch to match the width of your strap. I just didn't want to use my wider D-rings because I do leather work, so I have all these 3/4 inch ones. I wanted to utilize those. So being my cowhide straps are 1 inch wide and my D-rings are only 3/4 inches, that's why I'm making these notches. Again, like I said, you can use wider D-rings and then you don't have to do this step, but I was just utilizing what I had on hand, and this is how I went about doing it. So you can make this however you want. You can customize it to your needs or whatever. So you don't have to follow this step verbatim, but if you are like me and you have something that doesn't quite fit, you can adjust it to make it fit. So definitely work smarter, not harder. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the one that I already cut the notches out of as a template. That way I don't have to measure every stinking time because there's 4 of these straps. So it's just easier to lay it on top and mark it like I'm doing here. And then voila, done, easy. So here I'm showing you, I should have just assembled these right here so that way you could see, but I'm just laying everything out so you know what's needed for the straps. I'm just missing my 2 little keychain rings that attach the clasp to the D-rings.
So when you go out and you measure your window, depending on if, it doesn't matter if you do the inside of the frame or the outside of the frame. These are things you're gonna have to think about when you get ready to sew it. So I measured mine, the width was 1 foot 4 inches from outside frame to outside frame, and then 2 foot 1 inches from bottom of frame to top of frame. So ultimately this will hide the window, the 1 foot by 4 or 1 foot 4 inches and 2 foot 1 inches. However, we got to account for seam allowance, that's the stash line, all the way around basically, and the unwritten rule is like 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then up top, because you're folding this over, depending on how wide your board is that you're using, I used 1 inch. So my 2 foot 1 inch, I wanted to add an extra 4 inches. I wanted to make sure I had enough to go around the board to sew like a loop for it to go through. And then if you wanted to hem that backside under, which I did on my initial one, but I didn't have enough on this one, you would account for another 1/2 inch of seam allowance. So if you do the math, you take your width that you measured for the width, and then you add another inch, because you're just allowing for that 1/2 inch seam allowance up the entire thing. So you would just add another inch, so it gives you a total of 1 foot 5 inches for the width of fabric. And then for your length, you take your measurement. Mine was 2 foot 1 inches, and then I added another 3.5 to go around my 1 inch rod, whatever you want to call it, piece of wood. And then I would have accounted for another extra 1/2 inch of seam allowance if I wanted to put a hem on this side. So ultimately my fabric cut would be 1.5 foot by 2, so 1 foot 5 inches by 2 foot 5 inches is what I should have cut my fabric to. So I just wanted to explain that. And that way you could do the math, because like I said, by the time this is all said and done, after you get done sewing, after you've hemmed it, turned it inside out, you want this to be what you measured. So mine is, luckily, it's the 2 foot by 1 inch and the 1 foot by 4 inches since I've got it done. And then you want the extra 4 inches for going around this, so you can, you know, put this inside and be able to slide that in and out in case something happens to it. So yeah, and then the extra 1/2 inch would have been if you would have hemmed this under. I did that on my last one. This isn't an important step because that's going to be screwed up to your window, so you're not even going to see that. You're not going to see this back part here. So yeah, just wanted to explain the measuring of the fabric, that way nobody got that wrong. Normally, that's what I usually do, is I get my length and width of the fabric, and then I lay the other one on top as a template, and that way I only have to measure the one time. So man, that is just so nice. Nice clean rip. Okay, take and invert the pattern one. You want it on the inside. And you might have to cut the pattern a little bit better than what it is, so we don't have so much hanging over. Okay. You want to hold on to your thread, go forward, then do a couple back stitches, lock it in.
So this is where I'm sewing the 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to go around the 3 sides, the 2 long sides and the bottom where the bottom board will be put in.
Okay, with your needle down, pick your foot up, turn.
So when you get to this last side over here, you're going to stop sewing when you get to the top. Basically, you're making a pillowcase.
Back view, lock in place. Put your threads. Now you're going to take the pillowcase and flip it inside out. Now that you have that, if you have an iron, you could iron it down. But again, we're not gonna worry about that. Then you're gonna take one of your pieces. I'm gonna put it inside all the way to the bottom. This will be the piece that weights it down so it flops right down. We're not gonna worry about getting it super tight to that. I just wanna get it somewhat in there. You could put your presser foot pretty much right up against it if you would like. Back stitch. Back stitch and then forward. And then cut your thread. So you can get thread that actually matches a little bit better so it blends in. But that's gonna help hold that bottom board in place. Okay, so now that we have our little piece of wood down at the bottom and we got it sewn in so it's not gonna go anywhere, we're going to make sure that the top of this one sits at the top of our window frame we measured. So 2 foot 1 inch. So being we hemmed a little bit, we want to remeasure. And we want the top to be about right there. So I'm going to set this at that mark, and I'm going to come down below it and put the mark with a pin, and I'm going to come over to the other side. Let's see if I can get it to not fall off the table. So yeah, it's about where I want it to be. I'm going to make a mark at the bottom, because I'm going to go from my mark to my mark and draw a line. And I'm not worried about you being able to see my stitches, and then I'm gonna fold it to make a loop. That way, hopefully I can get this bad boy in. I wanted this to where I could take it in and out in case something happened to this, like when you go to screw it in, if you split the board or something and you gotta get a new piece, then you can just pull it out and then put a new one in. You flip it and mark. Where'd my chalk go? With the chalk, this one other time, and it was completely, it's different when you're just doing it on your own versus trying to show somebody how to do it. Yeah, leave enough. Personally, I don't want to do it this way. I want to make it to where I can take this out if need be. But if you wanted to, you could put the stitch across there, put this down in there, and then use what was left and stitch down.
So here I'm just showing you how I'm folding the excess fabric over in the back. This is what's gonna make my loop for my board to go through. I'm literally just using some chalk because it can be rubbed off so it's not permanent. Using the board to make a straight line. That's the line I'm gonna stitch across to make my loop. And then I'm just gonna pin it into place.
Oh yeah. And that fits in there nice and pretty. This is going to be behind, so you're not gonna see it. Like I said, you can hem it if you would like that to be a prettier, but I'm not worried about it. So we're gonna stitch that. Then, I think before we do that, sorry, I'm like scatterbrained, I'm all over the place. Rings on. So we're gonna thread them through. You can use a bigger D-ring. I just didn't want to use my bigger ones. I'm going to fold that over and stitch it, because then this, I think we'll put over the top. I made little notches because this is wider than the actual D-ring, so that way the D-ring sits down in there flush, but it's still wide. It still looks good. There's 2. 3. And 4. You're gonna have 2 of these attached like this up here, and then the other 2 somewhere like down in here. That way when you roll it up, these will come around and clip onto those. You're gonna take your keychain, you're gonna run this clip through it. You might be able to find these where they're already like assembled. I'm not sure. Get on the internet. The internet is a fabulous place to find all kinds of stuff and tutorials for everything. So there's one clip. These clips swivel, so it won't matter what direction you put them on. This one on. Sorry, my French Bulldog is loud. He breathes loud and sounds like a pig. And likes to sit right next to me whenever I'm doing this kind of stuff for whatever reason. Okay. So the ones with the clips are gonna go down here. It just depends on like how far up you want it rolled, which will determine how close you put them up here. These will just need to be, you know, long enough to where they flip over the top. So I think what we're gonna do, what we have to do is, I'm gonna have to undo this. Well, before I do that, sorry, I am so back and forth because I was just, I didn't have instructions when I made mine. I just kind of like I said, I winged it. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're going to mark where we want these. I kind of like mine about like that. So what I do is I kind of go around the edge a little bit. You can measure if you would like, so you know they're even. Okay, so you're gonna have to make sure that these are facing the right direction. So even though this is gonna be flipped over, you want them where they're hanging down. So, which your mark should indicate that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna flip her around and then back into place. You don't want to make it so snug that you can't get this thing in and out, because that'll be a pain. Pull this thing out. Let her ride. So you take this first pin. Okie dokie. So now you have your loop for your little board to go through that will screw to the top of your frame. And before you put this in there, you'll want to measure about where you're gonna put your screws into your frame, and you're gonna wanna pre-drill holes. Because if you don't, you'll strip. And those aren't perfect because I didn't measure. They're a little off. So I'm just demonstrating. You want to drill holes, then stick it through. And you'll want to mark, so that goes in there like so. So now you got two perfectly, but you'll mark where your holes are. I can feel them through there. That one's right where my thing is. So obviously you're gonna offset your holes where they're like on the outsides, like out here. And then you'll be able to feel, and then what I did was I just literally poked through the fabric, because if you don't and you go to screw that in, the screw's gonna cut your fabric and it's gonna twist it. So drill your holes, put your piece of wood in, and then get like a sewing awl or something like pointy and poke holes in your fabric. Good enough to where you can get a screw through there. But yeah, it's not the most even stitching. Basically, that's the gist of it. So now we just got one last thing, and that's to put these on. So how I did this, I probably went out and actually held this up against my door, but really, you can take this thing, roll it up, put those on top. This is gonna show you about where you want to put these. So the tighter you want it, the more snug you can make it. I would probably, so you could see a little bit of your curtain, put it about right there. This is woman math, okay? So it doesn't have to be perfect, but if you can just kind of set it down and see, if you want, you could do more than that if you wanted. You could unroll it one more time and have your strap right there. It doesn't really matter. It's all personal preference, but, and if you wanted, you can make these straps longer, but for this purpose, we're just going to kind of position them on there, make sure they are where we want them, and then I just flip it over like so. Get your chalk and mark where those are gonna go. Bring this guy back up here. Girl math. I hate measuring stuff, so this is what I do. Okay, so then you're gonna unhook these. And if you're nervous about sewing these on backwards or something, you can always like leave it rolled up and have them facing the correct way. That way you know that you're gonna sew it on right, and then just kind of lay it down and unfold it. That way you know you're putting them on right. Again, if you don't want your stitching to show, you would have to do this step before you sew the two pieces together, which is completely fine. So if you did that, the stitching would show up here, but it wouldn't come across on the front. I wasn't worried about that because, I mean, no one's probably going to look that closely at it. And this just makes it a lot simpler, in my opinion. It's less to think about, but it's an option. You can do this so many different ways. So, got those where we got marked. Hold your top stitch at least. So see, if you don't want that stitching to show, then you would do that step on your black fabric, and this chalk will rub off before you sew the two pieces together, which, I mean, makes it look nicer. I ain't worried about it. So yeah, there you have it. There's your roll up curtain. This part, like I said, you screw it to the frame, and then you just roll this bad boy up. And then those would hang down. And you clip it together. Easy as that. So, if you have any questions or anything, give me a shout. Thanks.